Hey, how are we, youth? This is parable number 30. Today we're looking at the parable of the Prodigal Son. It's hands down one of the longest parables that we are going to look at as we're doing this study through the parables. It's quite a long story, but there's so much wrapped up in it. And honestly, I was thinking about turning this into several weeks, but that would totally mess up the flow that we've got going where we've been covering a parable a week. But I've titled today's message, Welcome Back. Welcome back. And so that's what I want you to be thinking about as we read this parable. We find it in the Gospel of Luke in chapter 15. Again, we've been there for a couple of weeks, but we're going to be looking at verses 11 through 32. I would encourage you to look it up, maybe pull it up on your phone, the YouVersion Bible app, pull it up in your actual Bible, find it. I want you to be able to read through this with me as we go through it. And so this is what it says. To illustrate the point further, now Jesus is referring back to all the parables that he's already told in this chapter. Jesus told them this story. A man had two sons. The younger son told his father, "I want my share of your estate now before you die." So his father agreed to divide his wealth between his sons. A few days later, his younger son packed all his belongings and moved to a distant land, and there he wasted all his money on wild living. About the time his money ran out, a great famine swept over the land, and he began to starve. He persuaded a local farmer to hire him, and the man sent him into his fields to feed the pigs. The younger man became so hungry that even the pods he was feeding the pigs looked good to him. But no one gave him anything. When he finally came to his senses, he said to himself, "At home, even the hired servants have food enough to spare, and here I am dying of hunger. I will go home to my father and say, 'Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I'm no longer worthy of being called your son. Please take me as a hired servant.' So he returned home to his father, and while he was still a far way off, his father saw him coming. Filled with love and compassion, he ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. His son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against both heaven and you, and I'm no longer worthy of being called your son.' But his father said to the servants, 'Quick, bring the finest robe in the house and put it on him. Get a ring for his finger and sandals for his feet, and kill the calf we have been fattening. We must celebrate with a feast, for this son of mine was dead and has now returned to life. He was lost, but now he is found.' So the party began. Meanwhile, the older son was in the fields working. When he returned home, he heard music and dancing in the house and asked one of the servants what was going on. 'Your brother is back,' he was told, 'and your father has killed the fattened calf. We are celebrating because of his safe return.' The older brother was angry and wouldn't go in. His father came out and begged him, but he replied, 'All these years I've slaved for you and never once refused to do a single thing you told me to. And in all that time you never gave me even one young goat for a feast with my friends. Yet this son of yours comes back after squandering your money on prostitutes. You celebrate by killing the fattened calf.' His father said to him, 'Look, dear son, you have always stayed with me, and everything I have is yours. We had to celebrate this happy day. For your brother was dead and has come back to life. He was lost, but now he is found.'" There's so much in this story of the prodigal son, and you can see why I really kind of wanted to break it up into multiple weeks. But I think it's important first we focus on the main characters. So first we have the father, we have the prodigal son, and we have the older brother. So there's three main characters in this parable. Now the father in this parable, that represents God. God is a loving father, and that's who we see in the character of this father in the story. Then you have the prodigal son, the son who wants his inheritance now so that he can go live the life that he wants to live. And that really represents us when we're living out our desires, our sinful nature, where we have turned our back on God and in some of the most disrespectful ways. You have to remember, culturally, for the younger son to do this was such a high level of disrespect to the father. What he says to the father is, "You're not even dead yet, but I want the inheritance that I'm going to get when you do die." I want to take that now and I want to go do my own thing. I don't want to be a part of the family that you have here, of the work that you have here, the ministry that you have here. I don't want to be a part of it. What you do, I don't want to be a part of it. Give me what's going to come to me when you pass away so I can go live the life that I want to live. And the story shares with us that he squandered it all. He squandered it on wild living. The older brother calls him out for having, spent money on prostitutes and just doing all the crazy things that the world had to offer. He left home to go just live out his wildest dreams, and he lost everything. And it was at his lowest point where he's in a pig pen and he's just thinking that the food that he's feeding these pigs sounds pretty good for him. And he's reminded of just how good he had it, how much he took for granted, the fact that he had a loving father, a father who provided for him, a father who had a job for him, a purpose for him. And he knew that he had disrespected and disobeyed his father. And so he just wanted to be a servant in his father's house because even the servants were taken care of well. So he goes back. And we just see this amazing story of what it looks like for God's lost children, us, the lost sheep, those who have gone astray, to be met on our way back home by the love of the Father. You see, the Son didn't even make it all the way back. The Father saw him, and in order to see him, he had to have been looking for him. And we're told that years have gone by, but he's every day just looking for this Son, hoping and praying that he's gonna come back. And when he sees him, he meets him halfway. He comes running out to him and throws this huge party, this huge feast, giving him all the best things because he's come back home. He went from death to life. That's what it looks like when we turn from our sinful ways, turn from our sinful desires, turn away from that wild living, and we say, man, it would be so much better if I could just go back to God and even just be his servant. I don't even have to be his child. I just want to be a servant because I know that he'll take care of me. And God meets us in our mess and he brings us home. That's what salvation is. And then the third character is the older brother. And I think this is a perfect example of someone who has been with the Father. Somebody who, may be considered very religious, but their heart towards people who are lost becomes hardened. You see, he doesn't even refer to the prodigal son, his brother. He doesn't even refer to him as his brother. When he's talking to his father at the end of the story, he says, your son. Doesn't even acknowledge that this is his younger brother. He wants nothing to do with him. He thinks that he has gotten what he deserves. You want to take what you think is yours and squander it? Fine, that's fine, but you should not be welcomed back with open arms. And you definitely shouldn't get the best that our Father has to offer. And I think so often that's what religion looks like. Religion looks like people who have spent time with God, who now have these hardened hearts and look at people who are lost, wanting to come home, and they come up with all the reasons why they're not worthy to receive that. But the message of this story is those who are lost coming home. Welcome back. The Father welcomed the Son back with open arms. It's the story of those going from death to life, and that's what salvation is. So for many of us, we are those prodigal sons where we are just living these wild lives, but God is just waiting for us to come back. And when we do turn from those sinful lives and we start walking back towards God, when we start pursuing a relationship with the Father, he meets us where we are. He doesn't wait for us to get all the way back. He runs out to us because he's looking for us, and he's so excited for us to come back home. And it's a party. Heaven celebrates when one person comes back into relationship with the Father. So this is the parable of the prodigal son, but I would encourage you to read it again and really just find yourself in this story. Find yourself in this story and just remember that God is a good Father. He wants to have a relationship with you, and it doesn't matter how sinful of a life we have lived. When we turn from that sinful life and we start walking back home, he welcomes us back. So welcome home. That's the message of the prodigal son.
Ready?
Yep.
3, 2.
So today we're looking at the parable of the prodigal. Why?
Don't start with a.
Okay. Now I'm going to be thinking about it.
You're welcome. Thought I'd give you another thing to be self-conscious about.
Yeah.
All right. 3, 2.